You ever hear a song and just know it changed everything? Like the second it hit the airwaves, boom, music was never the same again. The 80s weren't just big hair and leather jackets. They were a revolution in sound, stage, and scale. And these bands, they weren't just popular. They redefined what rock even meant. Let's go. Segment 1, Guns N' Roses.
Talk to me softly, there's something in your eyes.
When Appetite for Destruction dropped in 1987, it wasn't just another debut, it was a cultural detonation. Guns N' Roses didn't ask for attention, they demanded it. Within a year, they went from Sunset Strip chaos to global stadium domination. Sweet Child O' Mine hit number 1. Welcome to the Jungle became an anthem. Paradise City was pure adrenaline. Every track was a punch to the gut, equal parts glam, grime, and raw emotional whiplash. But here's the wild part. No one expected them to make it. They were too unpredictable, too volatile, too real. Axl was a powder keg, Slash was a riff machine, and the whole band walked the line between genius and total self-destruction, and that's why they mattered. They weren't polished, they weren't prepped, they weren't packaged. They were the last truly dangerous rock band to hit the mainstream, and they made the world pay attention. Love them or hate them, Guns N' Roses shook the industry, and honestly, rock hasn't felt quite that unstable or that thrilling since. Segment 2, Queen. By the early 80s, Queen was in a weird place. They'd conquered the 70s with operatic rock epics, arena anthems, and more costume changes than a Vegas review. But by the time synths took over and punk tried to kill rock, people started asking, is Queen done? Then came the game. Another one bites the dust, Radio Gaga. Suddenly, they weren't just keeping up, they were outpacing everyone. Queen reinvented themselves with funk, disco, new wave, and somehow still sounded like Queen. But none of that prepared anyone for Live Aid 1985. 20 minutes. That's all they had. One shot in front of the world. And they torched the place. From Bohemian Rhapsody to We Will Rock You to We Are the Champions. Yes, so easy now, 'cause you got friends you can trust. Freddie Mercury didn't just perform, he commanded that crowd in the palm of his hand. Every clap, every note, every breath. It wasn't just the best Queen performance. It's often called the greatest live performance in rock history. And it reminded everyone this wasn't just a band, this was a phenomenon. The 80s didn't sideline Queen, they spotlighted them all over again. Segment 3, Metallica. When Metallica came onto the scene in the early 80s, they weren't even trying to be famous. No radio play, no flashy image, just raw, fast, technical thrash metal that sounded like it came out of a war zone. Kill 'Em All dropped in 1983, and it was like a brick to the face. Blistering speed, razor-sharp riffs, and zero compromises. Then came Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All, each one more ambitious, more aggressive, more precise than the last. They were trading tapes in parking lots while other bands were chasing record deals, and somehow that made them legends. Metalheads didn't just listen to Metallica, they believed in them. This was music for the outcasts, the misfits, the ones who didn't buy into the hairspray and high heels scene dominating MTV. And then in '86, tragedy hit. Bassist Cliff Burton died in a bus crash while on tour. No matter how far, it couldn't be much more from. Most bands wouldn't recover from that. Metallica got heavier. By the end of the decade, they weren't just underground heroes, they were redefining what metal could be. Complex, epic, unrelenting, and unapologetically theirs. Metallica didn't ride the 80s wave, they carved out their own lane and made sure everyone had to follow. Segment 4, U2. You twist and turn away. When U2 came out of Dublin in the late 70s, they didn't exactly scream future of rock. They were raw, emotional, a little unpolished, but by the time the 80s hit full stride, they were everywhere, and not by accident. War put them on the map in '83. Sunday, Bloody Sunday wasn't just a protest anthem, it was a battle cry, and New Year's Day showed they had the melodic chops to go alongside the message. Then came the unforgettable fire. Dreamy, atmospheric, totally unexpected. But it was 1987's The Joshua Tree that changed everything. That album was lightning in a bottle, Where the Streets Have No Name, With or Without You. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, all in one record. Suddenly, U2 wasn't just another band, they were the voice of something bigger. Hope, grit, restlessness, faith, doubt. It was all in there. And live, Bono turned every stage into a pulpit. Not preachy, just powerful. You didn't go to a U2 show to watch a band. You went to feel something. By the end of the 80s, they weren't just rock stars. They were global icons. U2 didn't just shape the decade, they carved their names right into its soul. Segment 5, Bon Jovi.
On the street where you live, girls talk about their social lives.
In the mid-'80s, Bon Jovi exploded out of New Jersey like a firework. Big hair, bigger choruses, and a frontman who looked like he walked out of a Shwellway Hollywood casting call. But here's the twist. They had the songs to back it up. Slippery When Wet dropped in 1986, and suddenly rock wasn't just loud, it was singable. Livin' on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name, Wanted Dead or Alive, back-to-back-to-back chart crushers. These weren't just hits, they were lifelines. Working-class anthems for people who needed something to believe in, even if it was just for 3 minutes at full blast.
Give it a shot. Oh, we're halfway there.
And Bon Jovi nailed something a lot of bands missed: accessibility. They could rock hard enough for the metalheads, soft enough for the radio, and catchy enough for your sister's mixtape. Arena-ready, radio-perfect, and weirdly timeless. They weren't trying to be edgy. They were trying to be everywhere. And they were.
She was living in another world, trying to get a message through.
By the late 80s, Bon Jovi was playing to packed stadiums around the world, and you could hear Livin' on a Prayer echoing from gas stations, high school gyms, dive bars. You name it. They took hair metal, stripped out the ego, kept the hooks, and gave rock back to the people. Segment 6, AC/DC. By the 80s, most bands were adding synths, trying ballads, switching up their sound. AC/DC, they just doubled down on the formula. Loud riffs, primal drums, and vocals that could sandpaper a wall. How, after Bon Scott's death in 1980, no one knew if the band could survive. But then Back in Black dropped, and didn't just revive them, it turned them into legends. Black cover, no frills, just a thunderous tribute to their fallen frontman and one of the best-selling albums of all time.
She was a fast machine, she cocked the motor clean, she was a fast damn.
Hell's Bells, Shoot to Thrill, You Shook Me All Night Long, every song felt like it had been forged in fire. Brian Johnson stepped in, and somehow the machine got even meaner. They didn't follow trends, they flattened them. While the rest of the 80s flirted with glam and gloss, AC/DC toured like maniacs and kept churning out brick wall records. For those about to rock, flick of the switch, blow up your video. Their secret? Simplicity, one riff, one groove, all killer, no filler. And fans couldn't get enough. By the end of the decade, that they weren't just survivors, they were the blueprint. Proof that if it's loud, honest, and hits hard, it doesn't need to change. Segment 7, Def Leppard.
Baby, come get it on. Living like a lover with a radar phone. Looking like a tramp, like a bitty.
Def Leppard wasn't supposed to break through the American charts. They were a bunch of working-class kids from Sheffield with mullets and Marshall stacks. But by the mid-'80s, they weren't just on U.S. radio, they owned it. Pyromania hit in '83 and lit the fuse. Photograph, Rock of Ages, Foolin' Radio was obsessed. MTV was obsessed. The fans, hooked. But it was Hysteria, released in 1987, that turned them into monsters. 7 singles, over 20 million albums sold. And the production, meticulous. Every note, every layer, engineered to perfection. Pour Some Sugar on Me became the unofficial anthem of the late 80s, blasting from every boombox and bar. And then there's the part that still stuns people. Rick Allen, their drummer, lost his left arm in the car accident before Hysteria dropped. Most bands would have folded. But Def Leppard didn't just come back, they engineered a custom drum kit and kept going. Rick taught himself to play differently. And the band backed him fully. That wasn't just dedication, that was grit. Def Leppard didn't just ride the glam wave. They redefined what pop metal could sound like when it was executed with military precision and emotional firepower. If Motley Crue were chaos, Def Leppard was control, and they both ruled the decade in their own way. Segment 8, The Cure.
The one that makes me scream, she said. The one that makes me love, she said.
While most 80s rock was cranked to 11, The Cure took a different path. They leaned into the shadows. Moody synths, swirling guitars, and lyrics that felt like diary entries written at 2 a.m. And somehow that quiet intensity hit louder than anything else on the air. Robert Smith, disheveled hair, smeared eyeliner, haunted eyes, wasn't your typical frontman, but he was unforgettable. And his voice, it didn't need volume to break your heart. Albums like 17 Seconds, Faith, and Pornography built their gothic foundation. But by the mid-'80s, they started writing songs that everyone could feel, in between days, just like Heaven, Love Song.
Soft and only you, lost and only you.
These weren't just hits, they were lifelines for the sensitive, the introverted, the romantics who never quite fit in. They didn't care about trends, they didn't chase fame, but their sound, atmospheric, poetic, unmistakable, ended up influencing everyone from alt-rock giants to modern indie bands. And their live shows, emotional roller coasters. You'd go from dancing to the walk straight into the pit of pictures of you, and it all made sense. The Cure didn't just change what rock could sound like, they changed what it could feel like. Segment 9, Van Halen. From the second Eddie Van Halen tapped out that legendary Eruption solo, everything changed. This wasn't just rock, it was rocket fuel. Blazing guitars, killer hooks, and a frontman who could do the splits off a drum riser. Van Halen wasn't a band, they were a celebration. The 80s were their decade. They kicked it off with David Lee Roth, equal parts circus ringmaster and rock god, and a string of hits that basically defined party culture. Panama, Jump, Hot for Teacher, songs that made you want to hit the gas, throw on your shades, and forget whatever rules used to matter. Then came the switch. Roth left, Sammy Hagar stepped in, and somehow, they didn't miss a beat. Why can't this be Love Dreams? Love walks in. Suddenly the party had heart. Same flash, but with a little more depth. And through it all, Eddie, the quiet genius, reinventing what a guitar could do every time he picked it up. His tone, his phrasing, that insane smile mid-solo. You couldn't look away. Van Halen weren't complicated. They were confident. They didn't question it. They just played and the crowd followed. By the end of the 80s, they weren't just headlining. They were benchmarking what a rock show could be. Segment 10, Talking Heads.
Can't seem to face up to the facts. Tense and nervous.
In a decade full of neon excess and guitar solos, Talking Heads carved out their own lane. Angular, cerebral, a little paranoid, and totally hypnotic. Fronted by the brilliantly awkward David Byrne, they weren't chasing rock cliches. They were building something stranger and smarter. Once in a lifetime, burning down the house. This must be the place. These weren't your typical chart toppers. They were part philosophy, part funk, part fever dream. But somehow it all clicked. They fused punk energy with African rhythms, synths, gospel, ambient textures, stuff that didn't belong together on paper but absolutely worked when filtered through their lens.
You start a conversation, you can't even finish it. You're talking a lot.
And Byrne, he danced like he was short-circuiting mid-thought, but every lyric, sharper than it looked, satire, observation, soul. Their 1984 concert film Stop Making Sense became an instant cult classic. No rock theatrics, no pyro, just minimalist brilliance, building piece by piece until the stage exploded in full chaotic color. Critics still call it the greatest concert film ever made, and they're not wrong. Talking Heads didn't scream for attention. They earned it, one twitchy, poetic, perfectly strange performance at a time. Crazy, right? 10 bands, 10 completely different sounds, and every single one left a permanent dent in music history. Some rewrote the rules, others set them on fire. But they all did one thing. They made the 80s impossible to forget. And honestly, that's the magic of this era. It wasn't just about hits. It was about impact. About bands that didn't just chase trends, they shaped the future of rock, one riff, one lyric, one packed arena at a time. If this brought back memories, or even made you curious about what you missed, hit that subscribe button. We've got way more stories coming, more bands, more albums, more moments that made music matter. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.